All right, everyone. I'd like to welcome y'all to another episode of the Southern Dogmen podcast. Tonight, I have Mr. Coda Stewart on with us. He is a local blood tracker. He's been doing it for 3 seasons. They've had a lot of success, and they are local to our area here in North Georgia. Um, with hunting season coming up, bow season coming up, and everything, I wanted to have him on. I wanted to talk about the dogs. Some of the way he's training his dogs, what he's kind of looking for, and just hear from him about what us hunters can do to have better success with a dog. Say if we need to call one in. So that's a quick introduction, buddy. You can take it away. Introduce yourself, where you're from, some of the counties you like to help out with, and we'll take it from there, buddy.
Sweet. Thank you, Blake. I appreciate you having me on. And my name's Coda Stewart, and I have a 2.5-year-old Catahoula lab mix. I actually got two of them. They're both off the same mama and daddy, different litters. And so we're working a young dog, and then Weston is my lead dog. He's going into his third year. We stay in North Georgia. We do get down to South Georgia every now and again, Taylor County, Upson County kind of area, and I'll bring a dog with me during hunting season and help some of the trackers down there if we get a call. But most of our bread and butter is Cherokee County, Forsyth, Cobb, North Fulton, some of those suburban bucks we ever get called on, and then also Pickens, kind of out that way, Dallas, uh, Bartow. But there's some really good trackers all over the state of Georgia. We got a good community and a good group of guys that really wherever you're at, one of those trackers, if they can't make it, they could get you somebody that's got a proven dog and could help you out.
Now you headed up toward Chattanooga this weekend, correct? With velvet season opening.
Yeah, so they had Velvet Season open this weekend, and some of the trackers up in Tennessee I had met at a tracking event, and they said, "Hey, man, we really need help with Chattanooga area. Nobody in Tennessee seems to be covering it, or lives around there that has a dog. Would you be willing to help out on Chattanooga?" And I said they would, and then I totally forgot. I signed up and totally forgot that they had the Velvet Hunt, and then my friend called me. He said, "Hey, are you ready?" And I said, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." And they said, "Well, we got the Velvet Hunt coming in this weekend," and that got me excited. So we had been working with the dogs on some mock tracks, and then it was slow Friday, and then Saturday afternoon, we got a call from a guy up there in Cleveland, Tennessee, and he said, "Hey, man, I shot this deer Friday night with the crossbow. Um, the arrow stuck in and then fell out, and the deer kind of dropped to the ground. He didn't like drop completely, but he got down close to the ground as he got his wits about him and did a 180 and basically busted out of there." Um, them as hunters, they went about 75 yards that evening, no luck, and so they just hung out. And the next morning, he said we went about 300 yards and found blood, but it was every so often. And right offhand, I kind of let him know, hey, that's characteristics of you're looking at a shoulder or high back. A lot of the times when you're dealing with the spinal cord, and some hunters have seen it. Hey, man, I dropped the deer and he got up and ran off, or I dropped him with a rifle and he never took another step. That's just where he led, and it's kind of the 50-50 you get with back shots. Is either it's going to hit an artery or just sever their spinal cord in general, or you're going to shock the spinal cord and that deer's going to drop, but he's gonna end up living. So we headed up there anyways, and put the dog on it. The dog ended up going, I would say about 800 yards total. So we progressed it a good 500 yards. We did find more blood, but in 800 yards we didn't find a single bed where he had stopped. And then we kind of got to a property line that we didn't know if we had exactly. They didn't know the owners, and but we found blood right on the barbed wire fence. And I said, "Hey, At that point, we had been at it for a little while, and I said, I think your deer's going to live. And so did some of the other trackers in Tennessee that he had just called for advice. Said, hey, it sounds like you're going to see that one. Well, lo and behold, we're leaving, and they said, hey, I'll you follow me to a truck stop. And I said, it's Saturday night. I'm going to hang out till 10:30 or so. It was about 7. I said, I'll hang out there and get something to eat and see if we get another call since we're up here. And as we're leaving, there's this old farm field, and it's got a little pond in it. And the guy in front of me slams on his brakes. I'm like, what the heck is he doing? I about hit him, and then he looks and he goes, that deer's in that pond back there. I said, really? And he goes, yeah. And it wasn't far from where we had stopped tracking, so I was like, it made sense. So we got out, called the hunter, and he came down on his 4-wheeler, and we there's 2 old women in the house across the street, and they start laughing, and we're like, what are they laughing at? And they said, oh, that's an old tractor tire. It's been in that pond for years. We got people stop all the time and say, hey, you got a dead calf in your pond, or hey, you got a dead deer in your pond. And that's what it was. So it got kind of everybody's hopes up, that we were going to find it. And then the next evening, Sunday evening, the hunter's son-in-law texted me. He said, I was looking at bean fields and saw the deer through some binoculars, and he had a wound on his high shoulder, but was eating in the beans, and was going to live, and was totally fine. And I said, that's pretty common that we see in the tracking world, that with that high forward back area, shoulder is always really tough. I tell people, it's better to be low and back than it is to be high and forward, especially with archery equipment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, you brought up that you'd been laying some mock tracks. Is that primarily what you're doing during the off season to keep your dogs in shape? Can we dive into that some? What you're doing, I guess, training
Yeah,
wise during the summer and leading up into deer season?
yeah, and I am by no means a trainer. There are some good trainers. If folks want to send their dog off, there's good ones in Florida. There's Mullins and some other real good trainers around. It's always been kind of my opinion. It's best if you train it yourself. You kind of get that bond with the puppy. Um, we started off with simple stuff. There's a really good book. It's Tracking Dogs for Wounded Game by a guy named John Genene, and he's up there in the Northeast, and he's bred dogs and had actually wire-haired dachshunds is a really good breed for a tracking dog. They're little dog, but I've seen some of them be just unbelievable and jam up. Um, but he goes over kind of everything. So as a new guy getting into it, it was a really good resource. I mean, a lot of trackers say, hey, read it like the Bible, but it goes into starting at a puppy and house training to obedience to e-collars to on lead versus off lead to training. And so me and Weston, when he was a little guy, 8 weeks, when we got him, we just started messing around in the backyard, and I would take some kibble. And I knew I had wanted to do this. So one of those things, if you want to get into it, save supplies, save some deer blood, save some deer liver in your freezer, if your wife will let you. Deer hooves on deer that have been shot and ran a good ways, as your dog gets older. But we started off with just kibble and deer blood, and in the front lawn going 5 foot and dropping 8 pieces of kibble and just letting them figure out, hey, follow this, and it leads to a bowl. Um, and then that transition to just a deer hoof that we're using a tracking shoe. There's I'm going to butcher the name, but a wasagu, I think they call it, tracking shoe that is basically a hollowed out shoe that goes on the bottom of your boot that will fit a hoof. And we will take that, and the deer's hoof has an interdigital gland, kind of how a doe will find its fawn in the spring. It's just like our fingerprint. I mean, it tells me against you, Blake, and everybody else. But when that deer's hurt and they're mortally wounded, that gland secretes a scent that we train our dogs to follow. So everybody has the conception, hey, blood tracking dogs. If I don't have blood, we might not be able to get it. Our dogs and most dogs, I will say most dogs, with this training are trained on interdigital glands. So there's been several tracks where a piece of intestine blocked the exit wound, and we didn't have blood for 400 yards. And then, hey, found the dude's buck. Um, there's two in kind of that I've been familiar with associations. There's United Blood Trackers, UBT, and they have three forms of testing: one, a two, and a three. And then there's the one that I'm more familiar with, American Blood Trackers Association. They're more of a southern, more into the off lead. The UBT, they do both. Both of them are great, but that is the one that I've been more familiar with, and they do a started, a seasoned, and a finished test. Um, and so what we'll do in the off season, they have events all over. They had one in North Florida, Alabama, Louisiana. They went up to PA. So all over the country, there's these events, and you can get involved with their Facebook groups and find one around you. And it's a wealth of knowledge, even if you're a hunter going to just sit there. Guys bring their dogs, they test them. Most of the time, if you ask, "Hey, could I go along and just watch your test?" The handlers aren't going to mind. But what they do, and it goes up in difficulty, but like a started test would be 400 to 500 yards using deer hooves and say 2 ounces of blood or an ounce and a half of blood, and they'll lay the track and put a deer hide at the end, and then let it sit for 2 to 4 hours, and then you'll bring your dog out there. You won't have any clue where it goes, and they'll say, "Hey, somewhere between these two flags is where the deer was shot." And they'll act like a hunter and put on a story, and it's kind of fun getting into it, and and see how your dog does. You get a couple recalls if your dog gets off the line. You get a restart, or we won't show you where the line is, but we'll say, "Hey, you've got a callback. You got one more, and then we're done." But it's just trying to organize the tracking world. There's a lot of people that got a house dog that finds a couple deer that are shot perfectly every year, and they go out there and maybe charging for the public and making a bad name for certain folks without a proven dog. And so by no means is passing some of these tests going to mean you got a jam up dog, in my opinion. And folks will tell you that are involved with it. Hey, if your dog's putting deer on the tailgate, that's all that matters. It's kind of just a way to get certified and have ribbons and take photos, similar to some of the other dog training things. But it is good, the camaraderie and being around other handlers. I've learned a lot of stuff with the Garmin that I didn't know before. They do cookouts and stuff like that. So it is, and even shot analysis. And if you see this on a track, it could mean this and that. But they're two really good associations to get involved with. Anybody looking to start, as well as that book, is a real good starting point for anybody that's got a young dog that's interested in doing it, maybe just for friends and family, or one day for the public.
Does it make a big difference, say, for a young dog that's getting started, if there's a heavy blood trail, would the dog pick up more on the blood trail itself than the hoof glands, or are they more so focused on the hoof glands? Is it putting out more of a scent trail than, say, the blood?
So the blood definitely helps. I mean, that is extra gravy, I call it, or icing on the cake. If we got blood that's going the whole way, it helps us, more of us as a handler, to say, okay, when we found that blood 600 yards in, the hunters had marked the last blood 200 yards or 300 yards behind us. And so that for me was like, okay, hey, my dog's on it. You got to just trust your dog, leap of faith out there when you're following them. And seeing that blood says, okay, we're on the right track, and the deer did come this way. More of a handler reassurance, but I am sure it helps the dog. I mean, when there's gut matter and clotting and blood and everything on a trail, plus the interdigital, and that deer's hurt real bad. It's just going to make it easier for the dog. Our goal, kind of with Weston, when he got to a certain stage in his training, we phased out blood altogether. And I'll go out there and I will walk with just the hooves, and we might go 800 to 700 yards, and I'll hang that deer hoof up in a tree about head high and go to bed and bring him out there 24 hours later with no blood, and he'll smoke it. I mean, the mock tracks, there's other scents out there. You're gonna have your jeans or your laundry detergent, but for the most part, it's as close as you can get to trying to do the real thing for the dog. And I've seen some unbelievable stuff, 30-hour-old mock tracks where, and you just try to make it hard on the dog when they get to a certain level and they're acing it. I'll take the hooves off completely and walk 50 yards in the middle of the track and make that dog hunt it. And oh, what is he going to do if that scent's not there at all? Okay, he starts zigzagging and progressing, and then ooh, there's the head snap, and he just hit that line again, and he start lining out again. Double backs, walking on that same trail and then doing an exit, and then we'll even do circles, just run over the track in a certain area in a 40 by 40 little wood patch and have a random exit and watch your dog work it. So when you get to those higher end levels, you're just trying to make it hard for a dog. um, there is several dogs that are to a certain level that I've heard, friends of mine, that they know it's a fake track, and they look at their handler and they say they refuse to do it, or if they do it, they mosey on down and they say, Dad, I really know this is just a fake one. you know um at a certain point, my young dog, he's ate up with it. He tracks like no other, and it reminds me of when Weston was a younger dog. um Weston is getting to the point, he still does it, but he knows that he's not on the real deal. Like when we were up there in Tennessee, it was a different dog because he knew, hey, he could smell those differences.
Okay. Well, for somebody who's, I guess, trying to do the hoof method and all that, is there a special way that you need to be keeping these in the freezer, or do you need to rescent those, or could you just use them over and over and over and over, and the gland keeps, I guess, smelling the way it does for the dog? Is there something special these guys should be doing?
Not a whole bunch. I mean, everybody's got their own opinion. My opinion is definitely, I mean, I'll keep them for say 4 or 5 tracks, and then those hooves turned into chew toys, or we'll put it on a string and just go play tug of war in the backyard. They won't be used for tracks anymore. With young dogs, you can actually fish out that interdigital gland. It's like earwax, and you can put it on the hooves and rub it really all over it, and that'll help a young dog that's transitioning from blood and hooves just to hooves. And then you'll phase that out and say, hey, he doesn't need that anymore. He's more advanced, and I can just put these hooves in these shoes and walk. Um, but I generally say, hey, 4 or 5 tracks with them, and then they kind of turn into chew toys. We do, a lot of folks say, hey, there's something you can do with your dog every day. You don't necessarily have to go be laying a mock track. You could take a hoof and thaw it out. That's one of those chew toys ones, and just play tug of war with your dog in the backyard. Keep it entertaining for them, and so they don't get burned out. Like you and I were talking about, squirrel dogs in a tree pen, where they're treeing all over, and then they go out and they're burnt out on it. You don't want to get a tracking dog burn out on it, to that sense either. We've also taken even just a European mount or a mount off the wall and gone in the backyard and watched them bay it, and get in there and bark and circle, and we try to hook them a little bit. There's people that have done that. If you got a bay dog or an on lead dog, and stuff like that.
Tell the differences of what that means for some of these people that don't know between the bay dog and the lead or the leash dog.
So there's a bunch, and I'll shout out Jessica Green. She's got a good bloodhound, and she's got a young puppy coming up, but she's local to this area, And me and her tag team some stuff for sure. And she's an on lead tracker, so she has about a 30-foot rope, and Gus tracks on lead. Now, Weston will do both. We kind of got suburban, smaller chunks of land, unfortunately, as these developers come in here and develop stuff, and the suburban hunt has gotten real popular. So there's a place for it for sure. And then up there, up north and Pickens, and you might have somebody, hey, I got a 100-acre family farm that we could run a dog on. And it's situational too. Jessica's called me and said, hey, this sounds like a leg hit. We're not going to be able to stop a leg hit on lead. I mean, you can, but it's more rare than it's common. And she'll say, this sounds like a track that you and Weston need to go run, and vice versa. I may call her and say, hey, this one is something. There's a road right next to us. There was one that we found for a boy last year that Bell's Ferry Road was right next to us, and it was like, we can't cut a dog loose. And so Weston did that one on lead, and luckily that hunter made a better shot than he thought, and that deer wasn't far piled up. But kind of two different styles, just like there's dogs that you may be a hound person, you may be. I've kind of found the Catahoula Lab mix. Cur dogs are kind of my favorite. There's people with mutts from the pound that they've made great tracking dogs, as well as blackmouth curs and little dogs, dachshunds, and all sorts of stuff around here.
No, it varies from state to state depending if you can actually bay the deer with a dog compared to having to have the dog on a leash if you're tracking, correct?
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee is definitely, that was one thing I had to brush up on before we went up there. They are on lead only, and only one dog. So you can't go drop two dogs on a deer, or anything like that. You're supposed to be one dog on lead. You're supposed to be out of the woods by midnight. And Georgia's kind of has a gray area on dispatching, and in Tennessee, they really say, hey, you shouldn't, I don't know it exactly, but it was more of, hey, we don't want pistols going off late at night, and stuff like that.
So what
There
about
is,
Georgia for say somebody we know they go out and shoot a deer and you and your dog you're going out you're tracking it and you find that deer still alive and say your dog bays it or y'all walk up on it, it's the middle of the night, you hit it with a spotlight, it's 40-50 yards. Us as a hunter, are we allowed to say shoot that deer with a pistol or a rifle, or would you have to back out and leave it laying and go back in the next morning to be able to dispatch that animal? How do y'all go about doing that? Let's just speak for the state of Georgia. Like you said, every state's different. But let's just say for us, if that was a scenario that we came into, what would we be able to do?
Georgia's a gray area. There's really no laws, and we've even met with DNR at some of these events and talked to them. There's no real laws that say yes you can and no you can't. Um, what I've always been told is, if you can prove that you're on a wounded deer track versus, they don't want anybody just running deer or killing deer at night, or poaching or anything like that. But if you could prove, hey, we got a bloody arrow and we're on blood, and that deer's sick and suffering, most wardens are going to tell you, hey, do what you need to do. I always advise, check with your local game warden. It's up to their interpretation, what they want you to do. Around us, if they're sick enough and we can get in there and poke one and not have to shoot one that's in a suburban area or something like that, and it's late at night, and that's going to cause a ruckus, that's what we'll try to do. And sometimes it's like you said, hey, there he is, he's gut shot, and he should be there first thing in the morning. That kind of goes into my next little thing is wait times. Wait times make a huge difference. It's hunters have been hunting a deer for a long time, and they finally get that chance to shoot them, and something goes wrong, it deflects off a limb or they make a bad shot, and they call me all the time. They're eager to go. Hey man, I need you. I need you. I need you up here. We got to go now. We got to go tonight. Um, Depending on the shot, there is wait times that most proven handlers will tell you to avoid that. We don't necessarily want them to have to bay one. It makes it, you know, more risky for the dog, more risky for the handler. These wait times, try to eliminate that. Now, during the rut, when they're got adrenaline going through their body, you may have to wait even longer or go back in. We've tracked some 2 days in a row because we got them up and weren't able to stop them after giving them the proper wait times. With gut shots, I normally say, hey, anywhere 18 to 24 hours, and if that deer is not pushed, he should be 150 to 200 yards from where you shot him. Now, if you go in there and you don't call a tracker and, and you track with your buddies and you keep jumping that deer, well, now that deer's gone 800 yards and he stayed out in front of you, and then you call a tracker. Um, what I tell boys all the time is, hey, you just made that trail that would have been 200 yards, 800 yards, and and now a coyote could cut it a lot easier. There's a lot more trail for a coyote to cut and find it before we do. And trying to preserve your trophy as best we can. Liver shots, they somewhere around 8 to 12 hours. Um, Leg shots, you want to try to get on those quicker than later. They will bed up because that leg's hurting them and they won't really be able to run, but you want to try to get on those a little bit earlier. um, and then same with back ham, kind of, you're in the low brisket area. A lot of those ones we don't get. They're going to be just healthy, shoulder, back, low. If you're kind of out of those vitals and don't hit an artery or something, it's going to be a tougher track, and you're going to be dealing with a live hurt deer. And so it really depends on, and there's a lot of factors. When the hunters will call, we'll have a hunter interview, and sometimes it sounds like that tracker's interrogating you. Hey, what it do? How did it do it? How long ago? This and that, and asking you a bunch of questions. But we're just trying to figure out, hey, how long should we wait? Okay, this guy's got 100 acres up in Pickens and he's got a gut shot. We're not going to fool with that deer. We're going to come 24 hours later and find him nice and easy. Um, this other guy's got a leg hit deer, and he's on tight property lines. We may have to have a whole different tactic for dealing with something like that to make sure that deer doesn't go run. And different things like that based on the scenario. And how I tell everybody, hey, calling a tracker is free. They won't charge you nothing to talk to them and get advice on wait times and where they think you hit and what type of shot they think you're dealing with.
So I know suburban hunting's becoming a big thing here in Georgia. The metro Atlanta areas and everything. I guess you're working those tracks a lot different from saying somebody who's actually got acreage, correct? Like you were
Yeah.
talking about with the tight quarters and everything. How do y'all go about the whole property line situation? Are you making sure the guys are calling to say get permission to bring the dog in? Is it kind of a gray area again, or is the DNR just like, hey, go get the deer? How is that working in that scenario?
Yep. So Georgia is a your right stop where my right start state. So when my property starts, it's my property. There is a lot of conception that folks have, and we hear it every year. Hey, DNR says, DNR, I've heard DNR will let us go get our deer. And I'm like, no, man, that's not the case. We've talked to a lot of agents. Um, that is just, there's nothing you can do. And so I tell hunters, hey, early season, talk to those neighbors. Go over there when you're not desperate and it's not 9:30 at night and you're in camo and begging to go through their property with a guy's dog. Go over there in a nice shirt or something, and just introduce yourself. Hey, I hunt in the area. Just want to introduce myself. And it's tough. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I know how it is, and I've had to do it myself. I've had, what got me into the tracking world was, a shoulder shot on a good deer, and it backed up to a neighborhood, and I had to knock on everybody's door and get permission. The very last guy said, "No, I'm not letting you." And lucky for us, when we did bring the dog through, he turned up to a larger chunk of property. Um, that we did have permission on, and we didn't have to go on that guy's property. But try to make those introductions earlier than when you can. Um, I'm a dog man through and through. Thermal drones are popular. There's a lot of controversy in the dog world versus that. Hey, a drone versus a dog. Well, a drone's not going to bay one. A drone's not going to stop one. A drone's not going to get a leg hit. Um, a dog will, and vice versa. There's a drone tracker in our area, and I've met the boy and talked to him, and he's respectful and he's good at what he does, and on some of those suburban ones I say, hey, call him, because it's a lot easier for him to fly that drone up and say, oh, your deer's in 4 houses down, and you knock on one door versus four, and you say, hey, look, my deer's in your backyard, let me get it out of there before it starts stinking, and just recover it. And that's a different approach. At the end of the day, we want, whether it's a drone or a dog. I mean, I'm always going to support a dog, but 99% of trackers are there to help recover your deer, whether that's with a drone or a dog. Um, but make those introductions. We got to get permission, and most of the time we are just banking on whatever the hunter tells us. So, there's been trackers that have gotten in trouble where a hunter tells them we got permission to go on a certain area, and then they're on a trail cam, and they're got people coming after them. Um, and so if I track for you, I tell you, oh, we got permission to go on here. Okay, just shoot me a text. So that way I got it in writing that, hey, we can go here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just to try and kind of protect yourself. But the easier the hunters make it in the early season by making those connections or talking to a neighbor, um, help out for those worst case scenarios.
Okay. Well, here's another question for you. You say, bringing up the drone stuff, the drone isn't going to stop that deer. What exactly are you meaning by that? I mean, I know there are scenarios where, say, the dog goes in and bays, or the dog just walks up on the deer and the deer is dead. But when you say stopping, are you letting your dog off his leash and actually tracking that deer down, and I guess like jumping on the deer to stop it or something? What do you mean by that?
So there is different dogs, primarily in the South. There's catch dogs and bay dogs similar. One might get them from a hind leg and literally stop that dog, or deer, excuse me. My dog Weston, if we're dealing with a leg hit and say, prime conditions, we got plenty of land, and you call me, Blake, and you say, hey man, I got bone on this. I shot this deer and I got bone here and blood. I'm going to say, Blake, you shot him in the leg, or we're dealing with some sort of leg, shoulder, elbow, something like that. That's a common occurrence. Some people think, oh, it came from a rib, but no, 99% of the time you're dealing with a leg. And hey, Blake, how much land you got to track on? Well, I got 150 acres my grandpa owns up here, and we know all our neighbors, and they don't care if we track on their land. Okay. Well, we're gonna head up there in a couple hours, or in an hour or two. I'm gonna get the dog loaded up, and we're gonna cut him loose. And when Weston finds that deer, he won't. That leg will be immobilized, and he'll be able to loose bait. I mean, Weston is a bay dog. He stays about 8 to 10 yards away from one, and we'll circle it and bark and keep it there until we can get in there and put that deer out of its suffering. Um, there is, scenarios where a drone, if it is a leg hit, a drone's not going to stop that. And that deer, it may have a screwed up leg, but he'll be able to stay out, as a hunter. Like, we won't really necessarily be able to run him down like a dog would be. He could still stay out in front of you. And so that's generally what I talk about. And, I tell folks the same time, if I got a domesticated dog that can stop that deer, what do you think 3 coyotes are going to do to them? They're going to start eating on the rear end and eat them alive. And that deer is really going to suffer, and nobody's going to win. Nobody's going to get meat. Nobody's going to get horns or a cape or anything like that. And so that's how I kind of think of it in my mind. Weston is a good dog, and there's deer that are not hurt enough. A high shoulder, high back, they're going to put the running shoes on and they're going to outrun that dog. I mean, I've seen Weston get smoked by a deer, and I've looked back and told the hunter, "Hey, your deer's going to live because he just burnt my dog." I mean, Weston tried, but he's healthy enough. You're not going to go run, even deer dogs and getting into that versus a tracking dog. Very rarely do you see deer dogs catch a deer. They're running them and getting them in through clear cuts that hunters can have a shot at. And the deer, if they're not really hurt, they're gonna be way too fast for a dog.
Okay. Well, we've been going here about 35 minutes. I guess this is one of the biggest questions you probably get, or I guess one of the biggest information questions that you could give out. Us as a hunter, we make the shot, we think it's a bad shot, we want to call you. What should we do to give us the best success rate to be able to find that deer and to help you and your dog out if y'all are coming up to help us? What advice would you give to somebody that has made the phone call to you?
Sure. For the most part, if they're calling us, they're probably doing right, or they've lost a deer before. For the most part, Blake, we get the call at 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night, and they've called uh, Bubba and 3 of their buddies, and they've already tracked or pushed that deer X amount of yards. And hey, I got good blood, or I found this or that, and really that deer's just stayed out in front of them. And our goal is we want a hunter to go find his deer. If we think that you could go find it on your own, by all means, we'll tell you, hey, go in there and take a peek. I don't want hunters just to be scared and shoot and say, "Hey, man, I need to call a tracking dog." We want hunters to go find their deer and track them on their own. That's part of it as well. Um, and so what I generally say is, hey, you shoot and you see something that you don't like, stay out of there. If you get down and your arrow passes through, and you're archery hunting, send a tracker a photo of the arrow and a photo of the blood on a couple leaves, and don't go pursue that deer, and call a tracker and say the deer reacted this way and did this, and they'll be able to tell you this is where I think your shot was. And just based on reactions, like I was saying, a lot of those high backs will drop to the ground. A gut shot will hunch up and walk off, and you'll say, "Man, did I even shoot that deer?" Um, well, yeah, you did. You were a little bit further back, and there's certain things there. Um, but my biggest thing would say is, hey, if you've made a marginal shot and you know it, um, take a photo of the arrow, mark the hit site, and back out and call a tracker. And time is on your side. The deer may die. A gut shot may take 24 hours to die, and and some people are worried, hey, it's going to rain and this and that. It might mess up a dog, and I got to go now. But the rain, as long as you don't really have a gully washer, the dog's still going to be able to track it. There's not going to be any problem with that. And so my biggest advice is don't go grid search. Go the first 100 yards. If you're not seeing what you like, or you don't see your deer or recover your deer in 100 to 150 yards, don't go call 4 or 5 friends and have them come down and stomp all around. That's just going to make it harder for a dog to have to figure out, because whether you think you're stepping on the blood or the interdigital gland or the line itself or not, you're going to track scent all over, and then the dogs are going to have to figure that out. And it can be done. It just puts a higher strain on the dog. Grid searching, is probably my biggest no. I kind of say that's the worst case scenario. If you don't find it with a dog, sure, go in with six of your buddies and look all over and just see if you find them. At that point, you've given the dog the best chances for success, to go in there on a fresh line and be able to follow the deer as easily as possible. And like I said, it can be done. We go behind grid searches all the time, and find deer. It just, I'll watch my dog zigzag instead of going straight, and I'm like, oh yeah, did you guys walk up to that oak tree? Well, that's why he's over there. And then he's coming running back and following somebody else's, and then he'll line out and he'll start going. Um, but time is your friend. Um, it's free to call a tracking dog and get advice, and keep grid searching as a very last resort.
Now, let me ask you this: going back to the rain thing, like you said, the gully washer it makes the scent trail worse. But say you got a light misty rain that comes in, it'll actually help that scent trail, right? Like it'll help the dog find it a little better.
Yep, it makes it easier. I mean, those are some of our best times to track in. Is give me a light rain, or a misty rain, in November, and a deer out there that needs recovered, and those are good ones for the dogs. We were tracking for those boys in Tennessee, and I asked them when we got up there, because we had that storm a week ago that came
Mm-hmm.
through pretty good. And I asked them up there, I said, hey, when's the last time it's rained up here? And they said, man, it's been about 3 weeks. And when it's dusty and dry, it can be done, but it's just a lot harder on the dog, scent conditions wise, and that plays into it. And then you think of, thermals play into it, with the morning and evening times. There's a great tracker around here that, has been doing it for a lot of years, and he'll say, well, I'm going to go get downwind of that deer and not necessarily follow the trail, but I'm going to get downwind of them, with a bloodhound, and he's found a bunch of deer doing that too. And so there's all sorts of things as a tracker that they could help you out with. But I hear that all the time. They say, well, it's raining, it's going to wash all the blood away. Well, hey, we don't need that blood. Um, yeah, sure, it helps me save my dogs on the right path, but, we're able to go and track better, and you'll see the dog work. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it too. Um, Work quicker and faster when
Mm-hmm.
there's some moisture in the air.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask, because some of my best mornings in the squirrel woods, it's been on like a misty morning, light rain.
Yep.
It just seems like it makes the. I guess to me, it seems like it makes the scent more. Man, I don't know how to describe it. It makes my dog look a heck of a lot better if it's any kind of rain or anything. He trees
Yep.
them left and right on mornings like that, so
Yep.
I didn't know if it was going to be the same way with the tracking dog and everything.
It is. It is. Yeah. I mean, I would assume when, I'm not a squirrel guy. I'd love to tag along with you. We've talked about that, but, I would assume it just holds that ground scent a little bit better, and makes it easier for Scoob to just get after him left and right. And same with tracking. I mean, it just holds that scent in there, and it may cool down. That deer might have walked up on this bank, and my dog's tracking down in the creek because it kind of pushed that scent. But eventually he'll get to it. But we see that a lot of times. A hunter will be like, "Well, I found blood up here, and my dog's about, 5 to 8 yards south of the trail, downwind of the trail, and that trail, that scent's just been pushed off a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but he's still tracking that same line."
Okay. Well, if you could have the perfect scenario for you and your dog to get on a track, what would it be for you? Gut shot, a heavy leg shot. What would you like? Something that
Man,
you can go in there and you're just absolutely gonna hammer it.
I would say, hey, a double lung where the guy absolutely smokes them. We get a couple calls like that every year where they're just hunting a big buck, and
They're just trying to be safe.
they're trying to be safe, and they do it, and they smoke the deer, and we go in there and we find them, and they would have found them without us. Those are easy. um I will say number two is, hey, a juicy gut shot, especially for this young dog that I'm working. I've told a bunch of people, hey, if you shoot one and see one, see them die and it's 100% track, I'd love to come track it if I can get up there just to get him to see his first real deer and get him working. But we did that a lot with Weston. But those gut shots, they leave a lot of scent on the ground. Some of the veteran trackers call them puppy trainers, because you got gut, you got blood, you got interdigital. There's a lot of scent on the ground for a dog to follow, and not all gut shots are equal. There are some that, unfortunately, that deer's going to live for 8 to 12 days and starve to death, and it's a brutal way to go, but. I have, not all gut, some people might take that and they say, oh, if I shoot him in the guts, he's going to die. Yeah, he's going to die, but he may have to wait till abscess sets in. And we've heard of one that we tracked that didn't die for a week, and neighbors were calling the cops. Hey, this deer's sick in my backyard. Um, and it was unfortunate, but it was one of those things. We weren't going to be able to get that deer that night because he was healthy enough, and just kept out in front of us, and we had given him time and everything. But that was, you know, we've dealt with some of those stomach and weird intestinal areas that aren't as lethal as being up closer to blood vessels and liver and kind of that area too. But gut shots leave a lot of scent, and are generally a pretty recoverable track. Kind of the worst is like we were saying, that shoulder is deadly to arrows. With a rifle, center it, pull the trigger, and you got a dead deer 9 times out of 10. The archery equipment, it makes it a whole heck of a lot tougher. And I would say 9 times out of 10, if somebody calls me and says, hey, my arrow's stuck in, I think I was a little bit forward on the shoulder, 9 times out of 10, we don't get those deer. Now, there is a rare occasion where we were able to stop one, or there was a guy that kind of had a frontal shot last year and blew out the deer's shoulder, and we were able to get that one. And then one that sounded, so even the hunter interviews are not the same as a dog man. You got to go run your dog and find out what the heck happened for the hunter, because, we had one that he said, hey, I shot this nice buck and the arrow stuck in and he ran off. And I said, man, you're right up the road from me. We'll come track it. But I said, these ones we generally don't get, and, he hammered that deer. He double lunged it. He just didn't get much penetration. And that deer was 175 yards laying dead. And he would have he would have followed the blood right to it. He didn't need us, but he had lost a deer. And so, that's where, as trackers, you never know till you go run your dog.
Yeah. And so not only y'all trackers, man, but y'all got some good information about hit deer. That's what it sounds
Yeah.
like. Your
Yeah.
shot placements.
Yep. And there's a lot of good trackers out there. I mean, Bartow, you got Travis Gallo, Matt Wilkes, Terry Wade, out towards Dawsonville and Hall County, up there, Chris Ray, Travis Wilson, and plenty of them down South Georgia. South Georgia, I know. And so, hey, wherever you are, if you need somebody, there's a couple Facebook pages. There's Georgia Blood Trailing Network. Those trackers, we're updating our list this year. They've been approved. They've gone through training. And if they're a young tracker, what we've done is set them up with a mentor that's a little bit more experienced tracker to help them get better. That way they're not just going out to the public and maybe don't have a dog that's ready, or 9 times out of 10, the dogs are fine. We see issues with the handlers, but we've kind of done that to mitigate anything there with some of the moderators on that Facebook page. The GON has Dial a Tracking Dog, and I've heard this year that they've added drones in there too. But 9 times out of 10, somebody on there, if they can't make it, they know somebody with a proven dog that can make it, and get you taken care of.
Okay. Well, man, I appreciate you taking the phone call. We've been on here about 50 minutes, and I know you got that youngin' and got to get up early for work tomorrow. I appreciate you getting on here, and you've gave out some great information, especially to some of these guys that's going to be deer hunting and everything like that. Talking about shot placement and what we should be doing to help y'all out. I've enjoyed it, man.
Man, I really appreciate it, Blake, and we'll get together here soon and go watch Scoob do his thing, and I'll call you if we get one of these tracks and have you come on with us and take a look at it. But I appreciate what you're doing for the dog community with your podcast, and your advocatism, or being an advocate for dog handlers and everyone out there, from coon dogs, squirrel dogs, tracking dogs, hog dogs, everything. It's awesome, man. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you, buddy. Before you get off here, go over some of the counties that you're willing to come to again, and give out your cell phone number, because I'm sure we'll have some local guys that listen to this, and I know I could have used you a time or two, for dang sure. So
I know it. I know it. But we are Cherokee, Cobb, Forsyth, Dawsonville, Bartow, and there's some good trackers out in Bartow, so I may refer you to one out there, but he'll do you right, I promise. And Pickens, kind of that area, and you can reach me at 678-294-8958, and we got a Instagram page, Cooters Outdoor Enterprise. We got videos, and also post our recoveries on there if anybody wants to follow along.
all right. Well, man, I'm gonna get off here. I'm gonna get this thing uploaded, and I'm gonna share it, man. I hope this podcast, it helps you get some more phone calls this year, man. And I hope to see a lot of tailgate pictures with some big bucks coming from you this year.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it, Blake. Have a good one.
You too, buddy. I appreciate it.
See you.